The morning rain tapped against the airport windows like impatient fingers, soft at first, then harder, as if trying to get inside. Inside the terminal, the air smelled like coffee, wet pavement, and that strange mix of cleaning chemicals and fast food that only airports seem to have. People hurried past with rolling suitcases and tired eyes, most of them already lost in their own worlds. Headphones in, phones out, mind somewhere else. Near gate B12, a woman stood with her back pressed against a cold metal pillar, trying to catch her breath. She wasn't supposed to be this tired. Not today. Today was supposed to be the day things turned around. But her body didn't seem to have gotten the message. Her arms ached from carrying her 2-year-old son, who was now asleep against her chest, his head heavy on her shoulder, his tiny fingers still clutching the edge of her worn-out hoodie. She shifted him gently, trying not to wake him, but the movement made her wince. Her left knee had been acting up again, probably from all the walking she'd been doing lately, chasing buses, climbing stairs and buildings with broken elevators, pacing hospital hallways during Liam's last asthma scare. She adjusted the strap of the diaper bag slung over her shoulder. It was frayed at the edges, the zipper barely holding on, and it smelled faintly of baby wipes and spilled formula. Inside were diapers, a change of clothes, a half-eaten granola bar, a small stuffed elephant with one ear chewed off, and a crumpled envelope with her name on it, her interview confirmation. That envelope felt heavier than everything else combined. She checked the time on her cracked phone screen. 7:43 a.m. Her flight wasn't for another hour, but she'd left the house at 5 a.m. just to be safe. There was no room for mistakes today, no second chances. This job, medical office assistant in a clinic 2 states away, was her only shot. The pay wasn't huge, but it came with health insurance. Real insurance. Not the patchwork kind she'd been cobbling together through odd jobs and government programs that always seemed to run out just when she needed them most. With insurance, Liam could get the inhaler he needed without her having to choose between that and groceries. With steady hours, she might even be able to afford a tiny apartment of her own, instead of sleeping on her sister's pull-out couch, trying not to feel like a burden. She smoothed back a strand of hair that had escaped her messy bun. She hadn't had time to wash it properly in 2 days. Didn't matter. She wasn't here to impress anyone with her looks. Just to show up, answer questions honestly, and prove she could be reliable, that she wouldn't flake, that she could handle stress. She almost laughed at that thought. If surviving the last 3 years hadn't proven she could handle stress, nothing would. She remembered the night Liam was born, alone in a hospital room, her hand gripping the railing, tears streaming down her face, not from pain but from fear. No one there to hold her hand. No one to say, "You're doing great." Just nurses who came and went, kind but busy in the cold beep of machines. She'd named him Liam after her grandfather, a quiet man who'd worked construction his whole life and still managed to come home every night with a smile for his family. She wanted her son to have that kind of strength, that kind of steadiness. Now she looked down at him, his eyelashes long against his cheeks, his breath soft and even. He was her whole world, and that world had shrunk to this: a bus pass, a part-time job that barely covered diapers, and a hope that felt thinner every day. She shifted again, trying to ease the pressure on her hip, and glanced toward the first-class lounge across the terminal. She didn't usually look that way, it only made her feel worse, but something caught her eye. A man in a dark navy suit standing near the glass wall, talking quietly into a sleek phone. He had his back turned, but something about the way he held himself, the straight posture, the calm confidence made her pause. Then he turned. Her breath stopped. It couldn't be, but it was. 15 years had passed, but she'd know that face anywhere. The strong jaw, the way his dark hair curled slightly at the temples, the slight furrow between his brows even when he wasn't frowning. It was him, the boy who'd sat with her under the bleachers after football games, sharing a bag of chips and talking about college, about moving to the coast, about writing songs together. The boy who'd kissed her for the first time behind the old library, his hands shaking, his voice whispering, "I'll never let you go." And then he had, without a word. One day he was there, texting her goodnight, promising to pick her up for the senior picnic, and the next his house was empty. His phone disconnected, his social media gone silent. Her calls went unanswered. She'd stood on his porch in the rain, knocking until her knuckles hurt, wondering what she'd done wrong. She never got an answer, not then, not ever. Now here he was, looking like he belonged in a magazine, polished shoes, expensive watch, the kind of calm that only comes when you don't have to worry about how you'll pay for lunch. He looked successful, happy even, the kind of life she used to imagine for them both. Her stomach twisted. She ducked her head quickly, pulling Liam closer, as if he could shield her from the past. She turned slightly, angling her body away, hoping the hoodie's hood would hide her face. Her heart pounded like she'd been running. Ridiculous, why should she care? It had been over a decade. She'd moved on, or at least she'd survived. She didn't need him. She didn't want him. So why did seeing him feel like someone had reached into her chest and squeezed? She forced herself to breathe in, out. You're fine. You're okay. He doesn't even know you're here. But then, as if sensing her thoughts, he glanced in her direction. Their eyes met just for a second, but it was enough. His expression changed, confusion, then recognition, then something softer, almost pained. He took a half step forward, phone lowering in his hand. Panic flared in her chest. She couldn't talk to him, not now. Not like this, with spit up on her shoulder, dark circles under her eyes, wearing shoes with a hole in the sole. She turned abruptly, pretending to check the departure board, her back to him, her pulse roaring in her ears. She could feel his gaze on her, heavy and curious, and it made her skin crawl with a mix of shame and anger. She remembered the last time she'd seen him. Well, not really seen him, but heard about him. A mutual friend had mentioned years ago that he'd gone to some big university on the West Coast, that his family had pulled strings, that he'd made it. She'd nodded and changed the subject. She didn't want to hear about his perfect life while she was changing diapers in a bathroom stall because her apartment had no hot water. Now, standing in this crowded airport, she felt that old wound reopen, a quiet ache of betrayal, of abandonment, but beneath it something else stirred, a flicker of the girl she used to be, the one who believed in love letters and forever promises, the one who thought they'd build a life together, brick by brick, dream by dream. She shook her head sharply, pushing the memory away. That girl was gone. Life had sandpapered her down to something tougher, quieter, more practical. She didn't have time for ghosts. Liam stirred in her arms, letting out a soft whimper. She rocked him gently, humming a lullaby her mother used to sing. Shh, baby. Mama's here. She glanced at the gate again. Still no boarding call. She needed to sit down. Her legs were trembling. She spotted an empty seat near a charging station and shuffled toward it, careful not to jostle Liam too much. As she lowered herself onto the hard plastic, relief washed over her, just for a moment. Then she saw him again. He was walking toward her, not fast, not aggressively, just coming. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes never left hers. She froze. Should she get up and walk away? Pretend she didn't see him? But that would look even stranger. And she was too tired to run. He stopped a few feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to give her space. Up close she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. He looked older, yes, but also tired. Not in the same way she was tired, but in a different, heavier way, like he carried something invisible. Maya, he said softly. His voice was deeper than she remembered, but still familiar, like a song she hadn't heard in years but could still hum. She nodded, unable to speak. Her throat felt tight. It is you, he said, a small, sad smile touching his lips. I wasn't sure. You look different, she almost laughed. So do you. He glanced at Liam, still asleep in her arms. His eyes softened. Is this yours? She nodded again. His name's Liam. He's beautiful, he said, and it didn't sound like a line. It sounded real. Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. The airport noise faded into the background. The announcements, the rolling suitcases, the chatter of strangers. It was just the two of them, standing in the wreckage of 15 years. I'm sorry, he said finally, his voice low. For everything. For leaving the way I did. I should have said goodbye. She looked down at Liam, avoiding his eyes. It was a long time ago. But it mattered, he said. It still matters. She didn't answer. What could she say? That yes, it had shattered her? That she'd spent months wondering if she wasn't enough? That she'd carried that doubt into every relationship after, always waiting for the other shoe to drop? Instead, she just said, I'm okay now. He studied her face as if trying to read between the lines. Maybe he saw the exhaustion. The worry. The quiet desperation she tried so hard to hide. Maybe he didn't. Either way, he didn't push. "I'm heading to Seattle," he said. "Business trip, you?" "Job interview," she said, keeping it vague. "In Portland?" "That's great," he said, and she could tell he meant it. "You always were the smartest person I knew." She looked up then, surprised. "You remember that?" "I remember everything," he said quietly. Before she could respond, Liam woke up with a start, blinking his big brown eyes. He looked around, confused, then buried his face in her neck with a sleepy sigh. She kissed the top of his head. "Hey, sweet boy. You hungry?" Liam nodded, rubbing his eyes. She rummaged in the diaper bag for a pouch of applesauce, her movements automatic. When she looked up again, the man, Daniel, was still there, watching them with an expression she couldn't quite place. Not pity, not curiosity. Something warmer. Something like longing. "I should go," she said, standing slowly. "Boarding's probably soon." He nodded but didn't move. Then, quickly, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. He held it out to her. "If you ever need anything. Anything at all. Call me." She hesitated. Taking it felt like opening a door she'd welded shut years ago. But refusing felt childish. And honestly, she was too tired to care about pride right now. She took the card. It was thick, expensive paper. His name, Daniel Reyes, and a title, CEO, Vertitech. Below it, a phone number and email. She tucked it into her bag without looking at it again. "Thanks," she said. He gave her one last look, long, searching, and then stepped back. "Good luck with the interview." "Maya." "You too," she said. And just like that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the stream of travelers heading toward first class. She stood there for a moment, heart still racing, then sank back into the seat. Liam babbled softly, smearing applesauce on his cheek. She wiped it away with her sleeve, her mind spinning. She didn't know what that just was. A coincidence? A cruel joke? A second chance? She didn't know. All she knew was that her flight was boarding soon. Her son needed a clean diaper, and she still had a job to fight for. She took a deep breath, stood up and walked toward the gate, past the first-class lounge, past the ghosts, toward whatever came next. The flight to Portland was bumpy, and Liam cried most of the way. She rocked him in the cramped seat, whispering nonsense words and singing off-key lullabies, her eyes fixed on the clouds outside the window. Every time the plane dropped suddenly, her stomach lurched, not just from the turbulence, but from the memory of those few minutes at the airport. The way he'd looked at her. The way his voice had cracked when he said her name. The business card tucked deep in her bag like a secret she wasn't sure she wanted to keep. She told herself it didn't matter. He was a stranger now, a rich stranger in a fancy suit. His life was boardrooms and private jets. Hers was laundry lists and pediatrician appointments. They didn't live in the same world anymore. They hadn't for a long time, but still, she couldn't stop thinking about it. When they landed, rain greeted them again, cold, steady. Pacific Northwest rain that soaked through her thin jacket before she even made it to the shuttle. She clutched Liam's hand tightly as they walked, her worn sneakers squelching with every step. The clinic where her interview was scheduled sat in a quiet neighborhood of brick buildings and tall evergreen trees. It looked clean, calm, professional. Exactly the kind of place she wanted to be part of. The interview went, okay, not great, not terrible. The office manager was kind but brisk, asking about her experience, her availability, her ability to handle patient records and insurance forms. She answered honestly. Yes, she'd done similar work before, though not in a medical setting. Yes, she could work early mornings. Yes. She was good under pressure. She didn't mention the nights she'd stayed up crying because she couldn't afford her son's medicine. She didn't say how she'd memorized every discount code at the grocery store, or how she once walked 3 miles in the snow to save bus fare. She just smiled, kept her voice steady, and hoped it was enough. Afterward, she took Liam to a small park nearby. He ran in circles on the wet grass, laughing as raindrops hit his face, while she sat on a bench, shivering slightly, scrolling through job boards on her phone. No new messages, no callbacks, just silence. That night, in a cheap motel room with thin walls and a flickering lamp, she lay awake long after Liam fell asleep in the bed beside her. The business card sat on the nightstand, glowing faintly in the streetlight from outside. She picked it up again, turning it over in her fingers. Vertitech CEO. She'd looked it up on her phone during the flight. Renewable energy, solar panels, wind farms. The company was all over the news. Green initiatives, partnerships with big cities, awards for innovation. And he was at the top of it all. She imagined him in a high-rise office looking out over a city skyline, making decisions that affected thousands of people. Meanwhile, she was counting quarters to see if she could afford laundry detergent. She put the card face down. It felt dangerous, like holding a match near dry grass. One spark and everything could burn. The next morning, she packed their things, checked out, and caught the return flight. The interview hadn't felt promising. The office manager had said they'd be in touch, but her tone had been polite, distant. The kind of voice people use when they're already thinking about the next candidate. Back home, her sister greeted her with a tired smile and a bowl of soup. How'd it go? She shrugged, trying to sound casual. We'll see. But that night, alone in the dim living room after Liam was asleep, she let herself cry. Quiet, exhausted tears that didn't solve anything but made her chest feel a little lighter. Days passed. Rain turned to gray skies. She went back to her home health aide shifts, helping elderly clients bathe, cook, take their pills. She changed diapers, folded laundry, scrubbed floors. Life moved on as it always did. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, her phone buzzed with an email notification. Subject: Following up, Vertitech Community Outreach. Her breath caught. She almost deleted it without opening, thinking it was spam, but something made her tap it. The message was short, professional, and signed with his name. Hi, Maya. It was good to see you at the airport, even under such unexpected circumstances. I hope your interview went well. I know it's been a long time, but I've never stopped thinking about the person you were, and the person you've clearly become. You've raised a beautiful son on your own. That takes more strength than most people will ever understand. If you're open to it, I'd like to help. Not as some grand gesture, but as a friend. Vertitech has a community grant program for local schools and nonprofits. If there's a cause you care about, your son's school, a neighborhood center, anything, I'd be honored to support it. No pressure, no expectations, just let me do something good with you in mind. Daniel, she read it 3 times. Her hands trembled. It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't even really about her, not directly. He'd framed it around helping others. Around her son's school. That was smart. That was kind. It gave her an out. She could ignore it and no one would blame her. Or she could say yes and it wouldn't feel like charity. It would feel like partnership. But here's what he didn't know. Liam's preschool didn't have a proper science corner. The teacher had mentioned it once wistfully during parent-teacher night. We'd love to do more experiments, but we don't have the supplies. Maya had nodded, heart sinking, because she knew she couldn't afford to donate even a set of plastic beakers. Now, here was a chance. She stared at the email, her mind racing. Was this a trap? A way to get back into her life? Maybe, but what did he have to gain? He was a millionaire. He could have any woman, any life. Why chase after a single mom with nothing to offer? Unless he really did feel guilty. Unless he really did want to make things right. She thought about Liam, his curious eyes, the way he asked why. About everything. What if he got to grow up in a school that encouraged that curiosity? What if he had tools to explore the world? That night, after tucking Liam in, she sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and wrote a careful, professional reply. She didn't mention her own struggles. She didn't ask for money for rent or bills. She focused on the school. She described the children, the teacher's dedication, the lack of basic science materials. She attached a photo she'd taken during open house. Kids gathered around a single magnifying glass, sharing it like treasure. She hit send before she could change her mind. 2 days later, he replied, "Thank you for sharing this, Maya. It means a lot. I've already spoken with our outreach team. We'd like to fund a full science lab setup for Liam's classroom. Microscopes, kits, books, everything they need. We can coordinate directly with the school if that's easier. Also, would you be open to meeting for coffee sometime? Just to talk, no agenda. I'd like to hear about your life, really hear it. Again, only if you're comfortable." She read it over breakfast, Liam babbling in his high chair, smearing banana on the tray. Her chest felt tight. Coffee, just talk. After 15 Part of her wanted to say no, to keep the wall up. But another part, the part that remembered his laugh, his hand in hers under the Friday night lights, the way he used to bring her wildflowers from the field behind his house, wondered what it would be like to talk to him again. Not as the CEO, not as the ghost, just as the boy who once knew her better than anyone. She typed a short reply. Coffee would be okay. Next week? He responded within minutes. Name the place and time. They met at a small cafe near the public library. Neutral ground, quiet, no fancy lattes or leather couches. She wore her best jeans and a clean sweater, her hair pulled back neatly. She'd even put on a little mascara. Not to impress him, she told herself. Just to feel like herself again. He was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 mugs steaming in front of him. He stood when he saw her a little awkwardly, like he wasn't sure whether to hug her or shake her hand. In the end, he just smiled and said, "You look good." "So do you," she said, sitting down. They talked about small things at first, the weather, the city, how much it had changed. Then slowly the conversation turned deeper. He told her about leaving town, how his parents had gotten a job offer out west, how they'd packed up overnight, how he'd wanted to tell her but his father had forbidden it, saying sentimentality has no place in survival. He'd tried to call her from California, he said, but the number had been disconnected. He'd written letters but never sent them. "I thought you'd moved on," he admitted. "I thought you hated me." She told him about the pregnancy, the fear, the loneliness, the moment she held Liam for the first time and knew she'd never be alone again, even if it was just the 2 of them. She didn't blame him, not exactly, but she let him see the cost of his absence, the sleepless nights, the missed milestones, the times she'd wished for someone to share the weight. He listened. Really listened. Not with pity, but with quiet understanding. When she mentioned Liam's asthma, his eyes darkened with concern. "Is he okay now?" "Mostly," she said. "But the inhaler's expensive. And the insurance? It's complicated." He nodded slowly like he was filing that information away. They talked for over an hour. When it was time to go, he walked her to the bus stop. The air was cool, the sky streaked with orange and pink. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. "Thank you for listening," she replied. He hesitated, then said, "There's something I need to ask, and I need you to be honest with me." Her stomach dropped. She knew what was coming. "Is Liam mine?" She looked away at the bus rounding the corner in the distance. She could lie. She could say no, and this right here. But she was so tired of carrying secrets. "Yes," she said softly. "He is." Daniel didn't react right away. He just stood there, his face unreadable. Then slowly his eyes filled with tears. Not dramatic tears, just quiet, glistening drops that he quickly blinked away. "I have a son," he whispered, more to himself than to her. She nodded. "You do." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time she saw not the CEO, not the ghost of her past, but a man, scared, hopeful, overwhelmed. "Can I see him?" he asked. "Just once? To say hello?" She thought about it. Not for herself. For Liam. What would it mean to him someday to know his father had walked away and then come back? "Not today," she said, "but maybe soon." He nodded, accepting that. "Whenever you're ready." They stood in silence until the bus arrived. As she stepped on, he called out, "Maya?" She turned. "I'm not going anywhere this time." She didn't answer, but as the bus pulled away, she watched him in the window, standing there, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than she remembered. And for the first time in years, she let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to carry everything alone anymore. The days after that coffee felt strange, like walking through a room you used to live in but haven't visited in years. Everything was familiar, yet slightly off. The air smelled different. The light fell in new places. And every time her phone buzzed, her stomach jumped, wondering if it was him. But it wasn't. Not right away. She told herself that was fine. She didn't need him texting her every hour. She didn't need promises or grand plans. What she needed was stability. A job, a roof, medicine for Liam when his chest got tight at night. And those things didn't come from old loves showing up out of nowhere. Still, she couldn't stop thinking about the look on his face when she'd said yes. Liam was his son. The way his voice had cracked, the quiet tears he tried so hard to hide. It wasn't the reaction of a man who saw a problem or a burden. It was the look of someone who'd just been handed something precious he never knew he'd lost. A week passed, then 10 days. She heard nothing. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe the reality of fatherhood, of diapers and doctor visits and sleepless nights had scared him off. She told herself it was better this way, cleaner, less messy. But then on a Tuesday morning, as she was folding laundry on her sister's couch, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her swipe. Hello, she said, balancing the phone between her ear and shoulder while folding one of Liam's tiny t-shirts. Maya? His voice. Deeper than she remembered from the coffee shop, softer too. Yeah. Hi. I hope I'm not interrupting. No, it's fine. She paused. Liam's at preschool. I've got a few minutes. There was a beat of silence. She could hear him breathing, could almost picture him standing in some sleek office, staring out a window at a city she'd never seen. I've been thinking a lot, he said finally. About what you said. About Liam. She held her breath. I don't want to rush you, or him, but I'd like to do things right, if you'll let me. What does right look like? She asked, her voice careful. Honesty, patience, no pressure. I know I don't get to walk in and play dad overnight, but I'd like to start somewhere. Maybe visit the school, just to see where he learns, or drop off a book for him. Something small. She thought about it. A book wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a custody battle. It wasn't even a promise. It was just a gesture. Okay, she said. But let me talk to his teacher first. I don't want him confused. Of course, he said quickly. Whatever you're comfortable with. They hung up, and she sat there for a long time, staring at the pile of laundry, her heart pounding like she'd run a mile. 2 days later, a package arrived at her sister's door. Not fancy, just a plain brown box with no return address. Inside was a children's book, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, and a note written in neat, careful handwriting. For Liam, may you always believe you can change the world. D. She read the note 3 times. No last name, no title, just D. Like he was trying to be a person, not a CEO. That night, she read the book to Liam. He loved the pictures of the windmill, kept pointing and saying, Spin, spin. She didn't tell him who it was from, not yet. But she watched his face light up and something warm settled in her chest. A few days after that, the school called. The science lab project was moving forward. Vertitech had sent a team to measure the classroom, and a full shipment of supplies, microscopes, plant kits, weather stations, was arriving next week. The teacher was thrilled. The kids were buzzing. Maya felt a quiet pride. She hadn't asked for this for herself, but she'd made it happen for them. That counted for something. Then the job fell through. She got the email late one night after Liam was asleep. Due to unexpected budget adjustments, we regret to inform you that the position has been placed on hold indefinitely. No explanation. No apology. Just cold, polite corporate language that meant, we don't need you. She read it over and over as if the words might change. But they didn't. The hope she'd carried for weeks, the image of a steady paycheck, health insurance, a tiny apartment with a real kitchen, vanished like smoke. She sat on the edge of the couch, head in her hands, trying not to cry. She couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. Rent was due in 10 days. Liam's inhaler was down to the last puff. And her sister, as kind as she was, had started hinting, gently, that she needed the couch back soon. Her niece was getting older. They needed the space. What was she supposed to do? She thought about calling temp agencies, about picking up extra shifts. But even if she worked every waking hour, it wouldn't be enough. Not this time. Her eyes drifted to the junk drawer in the kitchen. She'd tossed his business card in there weeks ago, buried under rubber bands and expired coupons. Now she pulled it out, stared at it. The thick paper felt heavy in her hand. She didn't want to ask him for help. Not like this. It felt like admitting defeat. Like saying, I can't do this alone, when she'd spent years proving she could. But maybe she didn't have to do it alone. Maybe asking for help wasn't weakness. Maybe it was just human. She opened her laptop, hands shaking slightly, and typed a new email. She kept it short. Professional. She didn't mention the job falling through. She didn't say she was drowning. She framed it around the school again. How grateful they were, how the kids were excited, how much it meant to the community. And then, at the very end, she added one line. If Vertitech ever partners with local nonprofits on workforce development or job training, I'd be grateful for any guidance you could offer. She hit send before she could delete it. He replied within an hour. Maya, thank you for your note. The school project is already in motion, full funding approved. But I read between the lines. I know things are hard right now. You don't have to pretend they're not. There's a nonprofit we work with, Pathways Forward, that helps people get certified in medical office administration. Full scholarship. Includes job placement support. I've already spoken to the director. Your name is on the list. Classes start next month. Part-time evenings. You could keep your current shifts. Say yes, please. Let me help you build the life you deserve. Not because I owe you, but because you're worth it. Daniel, she read it, tears blurring the screen. He hadn't waited for her to beg. He'd seen her struggle and stepped in quietly with dignity, with a plan that didn't make her feel like a charity case. She texted him back one word. Okay. That weekend, he came by not to the house but to the park near Liam's school. She met him there, pushing Liam on the swings. He didn't wear a suit this time, just jeans and a sweater like any other dad. He brought a soccer ball. Liam, shy at first, warmed up when he saw the ball. Within minutes, they were kicking it back and forth, laughing. She watched from the bench, her heart in her throat. She'd spent so long protecting Liam from disappointment, from absence, from broken promises. But this felt different. This felt real. Afterward, as they walked back to the car, Daniel said quietly, I had a DNA test done. She stopped. What? I needed to be sure. For me. For him. The results came back yesterday. He looked at her, eyes steady. He's mine, she nodded. She already knew. But hearing him say it, knowing he'd gone through the process not to doubt her but to confirm his own place in this, meant something. I'm not asking for anything, he said. Not custody. Not even a title. But I'd like to be there. For soccer games. For doctor visits. For bedtime stories if you'll let me. She looked at Liam, who was holding Daniel's hand now, chattering about the ball. He looked happy, safe. Okay, she said again. But slow. We go slow. Slow is perfect, he said. That night, after Liam was asleep, she sat at the kitchen table with the acceptance letter from Pathways Forward in front of her. Tuition covered. Books provided. Job placement guaranteed upon completion. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a cliff edge. It felt like a path, one she didn't have to walk alone. She picked up her phone and texted Daniel one more time. Thank you. For seeing us. For not looking away, his reply came instantly. Thank you. For giving me a chance to be more than the man who left. She put the phone down and looked out the window. The streetlight cast a soft glow on the wet pavement. Somewhere a dog barked. A car drove by. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life, but for the first time in a long time, ordinary felt like enough. The weeks that followed felt like walking on ice. Careful. Quiet, hopeful, but always aware that one wrong step could send everything crashing down. She let him come around, but only in small doses. He'd show up at the park with a snack for Liam or drop off a book or sit on a bench while she pushed Liam on the swings. He never pushed. Never acted like he owned a piece of their lives. He just showed up. And slowly that began to mean something. Liam started asking for him. Where D? He'd say, looking around when they got to the park and didn't see him. At first, she'd just say, he's busy today, sweetie. But after a while, she stopped correcting him when he called him Daddy D. It wasn't official. It wasn't legal. But it was real in the way that mattered, through shared moments, through bedtime stories read over video call, through the way Liam's face lit up when he saw him. She started the classes at Pathways Forward. 2 nights a week, her sister watched Liam, and she sat in a classroom with other adults, some older, some younger, all trying to rebuild their lives one certificate at a time. She was tired, always tired, but for the first time in years she felt like she was moving forward, not just treading water. Then came the night everything shifted. It was a Thursday. Rain tapped against the windows as she walked home from class, her backpack heavy with textbooks. Liam had been wheezing all day, and she'd used the last of his rescue inhaler that morning. She'd called the pharmacy, but the refill wouldn't be ready until Friday. Insurance paperwork delayed again. She'd tried the breathing exercises with him, kept him calm, but his chest still sounded tight when he slept. She was standing in the kitchen, staring at the empty inhaler, wondering if she should take him to the ER, knowing the bill would bury her when her phone rang. It was him. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Is everything okay?" She didn't even ask how he knew something was wrong. Maybe it was the way she'd texted earlier. Short, clipped, distracted. Or maybe he just knew her that well, even after all this time. "He's having trouble breathing," she admitted, her voice cracking. "The inhaler's empty. Pharmacy won't release the refill until tomorrow." There was a pause. Then, "I'm on my way." "No, you don't have to. I'm already in the car." 20 minutes later, he was at the door, not with flowers or grand words, but with a brown paper bag from the 24-hour pharmacy down the street. Inside was a brand new inhaler, a spacer, and a prescription for a stronger maintenance medication she hadn't even known existed. "How did you—" She started. "I called my doctor," explained the situation. He called in a script. "I picked it up." He handed her the bag. "The new one's better. Fewer side effects. Covered under most plans, but if yours doesn't take it, I'll handle it." She stared at him, tears welling up. Not just because of the medicine, but because he'd acted, without being asked, without making her beg. He'd seen a problem and fixed it, not with money alone, but with care, with knowledge, with urgency. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, then looked past her into the living room. "How's he doing?" "Sleeping, but restless. He gestured toward the couch. She stepped aside. He sat quietly on the edge of the sofa, watching Liam sleep. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, heart pounding. This was the moment she'd feared, the moment he'd realize how messy their life was, how hard it all was, and walk away again. But he didn't. He just sat there, his shoulders relaxed, his expression soft. After a while, he said, "I used to dream about this." She frowned. "Dream about what?" "Having a kid, a family, coming home after work and just being there. Not missing the little things." He looked at her. "I built a company. I've got offices in 3 countries. But I missed his first steps. His first word. His first day of school." His voice broke slightly. "I can't get those back. But I can be here for the rest." She didn't know what to say, so she just sat down beside him, not too close, but not far either. They stayed like that for a long time. 2 people who'd once been everything to each other, now strangers trying to find their way back through the wreckage. The next morning, over coffee while Liam played with blocks on the floor, he said, "I've been thinking, I don't want to live across town anymore." She froze, mug halfway to her lips. "What do you mean?" "I'm selling the penthouse. Moving back here. There's a townhouse for rent near the community center. 2 bedrooms, small yard, good school district." He looked at her, not pleading, just stating a fact. "I want to be close. Not for you, for him, so I can be there when he needs me, so you don't have to carry it all." She set her mug down carefully. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he said. "But I want to." She looked at Liam, who was stacking blocks into a wobbly tower. He knocked it over, giggled, and started again. That was life, she thought. You build, it falls. You build again. "Okay," she said. He didn't smile, didn't gloat, just nodded like it was settled. A few days later, he invited her to meet him, not at a cafe, not at a park, but at a small, quiet office downtown. A family counselor's office. "I don't want to mess this up," he said as they sat in the waiting room. "I don't know how to be a dad. I don't know how to co-parent. I don't want to overstep or disappear. I want us to figure this out together with help if we need it." She was surprised. Most people avoided therapy like it was contagious, but he was treating it like planning a business meeting. Practical, necessary, respectful. The counselor was kind, calm, no nonsense. They talked about boundaries, communication, consistency for Liam. They didn't talk about the past. They talked about the future. Afterward, walking to the parking lot, he said, "I know I can't undo what I did, but I can show up every day and try to be someone he can count on." She looked at him, really looked. The man in front of her wasn't the boy who'd vanished all those years ago. He was someone who'd grown, who'd made mistakes, who was trying to do better. And maybe that was enough. That weekend, he moved into the townhouse. It was modest, nothing like the luxury he was used to, but it had a small backyard and a window seat Liam loved immediately. She brought Liam over for a visit, and they spent the afternoon blowing bubbles in the yard. Simple, normal, beautiful. One evening, after Liam was in bed, she stayed behind to help him unpack a few boxes. They worked in comfortable silence, folding towels, stacking dishes. When they were done, they sat on the back porch sipping tea in the cool air. "I never stopped loving you," he said suddenly, not looking at her. She didn't flinch. She'd known it was coming. "I don't say that to make you feel guilty," he added quickly, "or to pressure you. I just needed you to know, even when I was gone, even when I didn't know where you were. You were always in my mind, in my heart." She stared at her hands. "I loved you too, for a long time, even after you left. Do you still?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer right away. Love wasn't a switch you could flip back on. It was a garden, sometimes overgrown, sometimes scorched, but maybe with care it could bloom again. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I'm willing to find out. Slowly." He nodded. "Slowly is all I'm asking for." They sat in silence as fireflies blinked in the dusk. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor laughed. A dog barked. Life went on, and for the first time in years, it felt like they were part of it, together, not as a couple, not as strangers, but as two people building something new from the pieces of what they'd lost. Later, as she walked home, Liam asleep in his stroller, she felt lighter, not because her problems were gone. Rent was still due, classes were hard. The future was uncertain, but because she wasn't alone in facing them, and that, she realized, was the greatest gift of all. 6 months later, the morning light came in soft and golden through the kitchen window, spilling across a small table with 2 coffee mugs and a half-eaten piece of toast. The apartment wasn't big, just 2 bedrooms, a narrow hallway, and a kitchen that barely fit 2 people at once. But it was theirs. Hers, really. She'd signed the lease on her own, with her name on the dotted line, using the first paycheck from her new job at the community health clinic. It wasn't fancy, but it had working heat. A locked front door and a backyard where Liam could run without worrying about traffic. She stood at the sink, rinsing out Liam's sippy cup, listening to the sound of his laughter from the living room. He was on the floor with a puzzle, and the man who used to be a ghost in her life was sitting cross-legged beside him, helping him find the peace with the blue sky. She watched them for a moment. The way he didn't rush Liam, the way he let him figure it out on his own, the way he smiled when Liam finally clicked the piece into place. "You did it, buddy," he said, ruffling his hair. Liam beamed like he'd just won a medal. She didn't call him daddy in front of others, not yet. Not officially. But in the quiet moments when it was just the 3 of them, the word slipped out sometimes, and each time it did, she saw the way it lit something up in the man's eyes. Not pride, exactly, but gratitude. Like he knew how lucky he was to hear it. Things hadn't magically fixed themselves overnight. There were still hard days. Days when Liam had a fever and she had to call in sick. Days when the car broke down and the repair bill made her stomach drop. Days when old fears crept in and whispered, "He'll leave again when it gets tough." But he hadn't. He'd shown up for parent-teacher conferences, even when they were at 7 a.m. before his own meetings. He'd learned how to braid Liam's hair for soccer practice after she joked that his ponytails looked like bird nests. He'd sat with her through her final exam for the medical admin certification, bringing soup when she was too stressed to eat. And when she got the job offer, he'd been the first person she told. Not because she needed his approval, but because she wanted to share the win with someone who understood how far she'd come. He'd moved back to their hometown for real, not just renting, but buying a small house near the park where they'd first started meeting again. He'd stepped back from day-to-day operations at his company, handing over more responsibility to his team so he could be present. He still traveled sometimes, but never for long, and always with video calls at bedtime. They weren't a couple. Not in the way people meant it, no shared bed, no rings, no public declarations. But they were something else, something quieter, maybe stronger, partners in the truest sense, co-parents who respected each other's space, who talked through problems instead of avoiding them, who put Liam first without keeping score. One Saturday morning, as they walked Liam to the school bus stop, he turned to her and said, "I used to think success was a corner office and a private jet. I thought if I worked hard enough, made enough money, I'd finally feel like I'd arrived. She glanced at him, surprised. And now? Now I know success is this, he said, nodding toward Liam, who was jumping in puddles despite his rain boots. Being here present, needed, loved, not for what I can give, but for who I am. She didn't say anything. She just reached out and squeezed his hand, briefly, gently, and let go. But it was enough. Later that week, she came home from work to find him in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. The apartment smelled like garlic and tomatoes. Liam was at his after-school program, so it was just the two of them. You didn't have to cook, she said, hanging up her coat. I wanted to, he replied. You've been working late all week. She sat at the table, watching him move around the small space like he belonged there. He did in a way she never would have believed a year ago. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes after you've weathered storms together. After dinner, he helped her wash the dishes, drying while she washed, their shoulders brushing in the tight space. When the kitchen was clean, he leaned against the counter and said, I've been thinking about the future. Her heart skipped. Oh? Not big plans, he added quickly, seeing the worry in her eyes. Just small ones. Like maybe applying for that advanced certification you mentioned, or taking Liam to the Science Museum next month. They've got a new exhibit on space. Or, he paused, maybe having dinner like this more often? Just us. She looked down at her hands, then back up at him. I'd like that. He didn't push. Didn't ask for more. Just nodded and said good, that night. After tucking Liam in, after reading Goodnight Moon for the 100th time, after kissing his forehead and whispering, I love you. She stood in the hallway outside his room, listening to his soft breathing. The man stood beside her, arms crossed, quiet. He's happy, he said softly. He is, she agreed. He's got your strength, he said. And your kindness, she smiled a little. And your stubbornness, he chuckled. Guilty. They stood there for a long moment, the house quiet around them, the only sound Liam's steady breaths. I don't know what we are, she admitted finally, voice low. But I'm glad you're here. I'm not going anywhere, he said, same words he'd said months ago at the bus stop. But this time she believed him. The next morning she woke early to the sound of rain again, gentle this time, not stormy. She made coffee, packed Liam's lunch, and got him dressed for school. The man was already there, waiting on the porch with an umbrella. As they walked to the bus stop, Liam chattering about dinosaurs, she realized something. She wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop anymore. She wasn't bracing for disaster. She was just living, and it felt good. Later that day at the clinic, her supervisor pulled her aside. We've had a lot of patient compliments about you, she said, especially from the elderly clients. They say you treat them like family. She just smiled. I know what it's like to need someone to care. That evening, she came home to find a small envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a brochure for a community college program in social work, part-time evening classes with childcare support. On the back, in his handwriting, if you ever want to go further, I'll be right here. She tucked it into her notebook, not ready to say yes yet, but not saying no either. Life wasn't perfect. There were still bills, still worries, still nights when Liam woke up coughing and she held her breath until his breathing evened out. But now when those nights came, she didn't face them alone. He'd show up with tea, with extra blankets, with quiet presence that said more than words ever could. One night, as they sat on her couch after Liam was asleep, watching an old movie neither of them was really paying attention to, he turned to her and said, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed?" She thought about it. Sometimes. But I don't live in that world anymore. This one's real. And it's enough. He looked at her for a long time, then reached over and took her hand. Not to pull her closer, not to make a move, just to hold it. And she let him. Because after everything, the heartbreak, the silence, the struggle, the slow rebuilding, this was what they'd earned. Not a fairy tale, not a grand romance, but something real, something built on honesty, on showing up, on choosing each other again and again, even when it was hard. And as the movie played on, unnoticed, she realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the love story all along, not the one that ended in high school, but the one that began again in an airport, with tired eyes and a second chance neither of them expected, but both of them needed. Outside, the rain had stopped. The streetlights glowed on wet pavement. Somewhere, a neighbor's dog barked. And inside, two people who'd once been lost found their way back. Not to who they were, but to who they could be, together. It had been almost a year since that rainy morning at the airport, and life had settled into a rhythm, steady, quiet, full of small moments that added up to something that felt like peace. She still worked at the clinic, now handling patient intake and insurance coordination with a confidence she hadn't known she possessed. Liam was in preschool full-time, his asthma mostly under control thanks to the new medication and regular checkups. And the man who'd once vanished without a word was now a constant. Gentle presence, not hovering, not demanding, just there. Like a steady hand on her shoulder when the world felt heavy. But peace, she was learning, wasn't the absence of trouble. It was the presence of trust. One Saturday morning, they took Liam to the farmer's market downtown. It was one of their new traditions, wandering the stalls, buying fresh fruit, letting Liam pick out a flower for his teacher. He held both their hands as they walked, swinging between them like a little pendulum of joy. The sun was warm, the air smelled like baked bread and ripe strawberries, and for a moment everything felt simple. Later, as they sat on a bench sharing a peach, juice running down their fingers, Liam giggling as he tried to catch the drips, the man turned to her and said, "I've been thinking about something." She wiped her hand on her jeans. "Yeah, I want to adopt him," she froze. Not because she was shocked, he'd hinted at it before, but because the word adopt carried so much weight. It wasn't just paperwork, it was a promise. A legal public declaration that he was Liam's father in every way that mattered. She looked at Liam, who was now chasing a butterfly near the flower stand, his tiny sneakers kicking up dust. "He already calls you Daddy," she said softly. "But it's not official," he replied. "And I want it to be. Not for me, for him. So he never has to wonder if I'm really his. So if anything ever happened to you..." He stopped himself, voice catching. "I just want him to know beyond any doubt that he's mine. That I'm not going anywhere." She understood. She'd spent years making sure Liam never felt abandoned. This was his way of doing the same. "It's not just my decision," she said carefully. "There's paperwork. Home visits. Court dates. It's a process, I know," he said. "And I'm ready for it." All of it. She didn't say yes right away. She needed time. Not because she didn't trust him, she did more than she ever thought possible, but because this was Liam's life. His identity. His future. She wanted to be sure. That night, after Liam was asleep, she sat at the kitchen table with a notebook, writing down questions. What does adoption mean for his birth certificate? Will he still have my last name? What if something changes between us? She wasn't trying to find reasons to say no, just reasons to be certain. A few days later, she called a family lawyer she'd met through the clinic, a kind woman who specialized in kinship and step-parent adoptions. They met for coffee, and the lawyer explained everything clearly, the steps, the timeline, the emotional weight of it all. "It's not just legal," the woman said. "It's a healing act. For the child. For the parents." When she got home, she found him waiting on her porch holding 2 takeout bags from her favorite Thai place. "I didn't want to push," he said as she unlocked the door. "But I needed you to know I'm serious." She let him in. They ate at the table, the spicy curry warming the room, and she told him what the lawyer had said. He listened quietly, nodding, asking thoughtful questions. When she finished, he said, "Whatever you need from me, paperwork, interviews, waiting, I'll do it. However long it takes." She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the CEO, not the ghost of her past, but a man who loved her son with a quiet, fierce devotion that didn't need titles to be real. "Okay," she said, "let's start the process." The next few months were a blur of forms, background checks, and home visits. A social worker came to her apartment, then to his house, asking gentle questions about routines, discipline, support systems. Liam, sensing something important was happening, clung to both of them during the visits, his big eyes watching everything. One evening, after the social worker left, Liam tugged on her sleeve. "Mama," he said, "is Dee gonna be my real daddy?" She knelt down hard in her throat. "He already is, sweetie." "In here." She tapped his chest. "But we're making it official so everyone knows it too." He thought about that, then nodded solemnly. "Okay, good." The court date came on a bright spring morning. They dressed Liam in his best shirt, the one with the tiny rockets, and held his hands as they walked into the courthouse. It wasn't dramatic. No gavels, no speeches, just a kind judge, a few signed papers, and a quiet moment when the man placed his hand on Liam's shoulder and said, "I promise to love you, protect you, and be there for you every single day." Afterward, they went to the park, the same one where they'd first started meeting again. Liam ran ahead, laughing, and she stood beside him, watching their son climb the slide. "He's got your eyes," she said, "and your courage," he replied. They didn't kiss. They didn't declare their love. They just stood there side by side, watching the boy who had brought them back together. A week later, the new birth certificate arrived in the mail. Same name, same date of birth, but now under father it said his name. She showed it to Liam that night before bed. He traced the letters with his finger, then looked up at her. "Now D is really my daddy?" "Yes," she said, voice thick. "Really?" He hugged her tight, then ran to his room to tell his stuffed elephant the news. That night she sat on the porch alone, the certificate resting on her lap. She thought about all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, wondering if she'd ever be enough for her son. All the times she'd told herself she didn't need anyone. And now here she was, with a home, a job, a son who knew he was loved, and a man who had chosen them. Again and again. He found her there a few minutes later, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Just thinking," she said. "About? How lucky we are." He smiled, sipping his tea. "We made our luck." She looked at him, his tired eyes, his kind smile, the lines on his face that hadn't been there 15 years ago. "Do you ever regret it? Coming back?" He didn't hesitate. "Not for a single second. You and Liam, you gave me a second chance at being the man I always wanted to be." She leaned her head on his shoulder, just for a moment. Not as lovers, not yet, but as partners, as family. The next morning, life went on. She dropped Liam at school, went to work, came home to laundry and dinner and bedtime stories. But something had shifted. Not in the big, dramatic way movies showed, but in the quiet certainty that she wasn't alone anymore. A few weeks later, she enrolled in the social work program at the community college. He helped her fill out the financial aid forms, drove her to orientation, and promised to watch Liam on class nights. She didn't ask him to. He just did it. One evening, as they sat on his porch after dropping Liam off at a sleepover, he turned to her and said, "You know, I used to think love was grand gestures, flowers, vacations, expensive gifts, but now I know it's showing up. It's remembering how he likes his toast. It's staying up late when he's sick. It's choosing each other every day, even when it's hard." She looked at him, the porch light casting soft shadows on his face. "I think I'm ready to try us again," she said quietly. "Not as who we were, but as who we are now." He didn't smile right away. He just took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I've been waiting for you to say that." They didn't rush. They went on real dates, dinner at a diner, a walk in the rain, a movie where they held hands but didn't talk much. They talked about their fears, their dreams, the things they'd learned while apart. And slowly, carefully, they began to build something new, not on the ruins of the past, but on the foundation they'd laid together over the last year. One night, as they stood in her kitchen washing dishes, he turned to her and kissed her. Soft, slow, like he was asking a question. She kissed him back, not because she owed him anything, but because she wanted to. Afterward, they stood there, foreheads touching, water still running in the sink. "No more running," he whispered. "No more running," she agreed. Outside, the world kept turning. Bills still came. Liam still had bad days. Life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, messy, beautiful, and real. And for the first time in a long time, she believed in forever, not because it was promised, but because they were building it, one ordinary day at a time.